Civil and military officials knelt all over the Great Hall, pressuring His Majesty the Emperor to establish an empress. His Majesty the Emperor was so furious he swept all the memorials off the dragon desk. Do I not want to establish one? Ask the Prime Minister what he did. His eyes reddened, his trembling finger pointing at my father. I went to propose 3 times, and he chased me out with a broom 3 times. He said I'm good for nothing except being emperor, not worthy of his daughter. The entire court gasped in unison, all eyes turning to my father. My father awkwardly buried his head in his sleeves. His Majesty the Emperor suddenly drew the imperial sword, planting 1 foot on the dragon throne. This marriage will happen today, Zan, whether he agrees or not. If he refuses, I'll go snatch the bride myself. When I heard this news, I was sitting cross-legged on the couch in my father's study, cracking sunflower seeds while reading a storybook. The maid from my courtyard came tumbling in, completely out of breath. Miss is bad. His Majesty the Emperor said in court, said he is coming to snatch you. My hand trembled, and the seed I just cracked flew right into my nostril. After a fit of earth-shattering coughing, I finally managed to get that troublesome seed out. I gulped down an entire cup of tea before coming to my senses. My head buzzing, Xiaoyan, that young Emperor Zan, has he gone mad? To bring this kind of bedroom secret? Oh no, it can't even be called a bedroom secret. At most, it is just their one-sided grudge, and it was exposed right there in the Golden Lewin Hall. Does my dad still want his dignity? Does our Shen family still want our reputation? Before I could even digest this bombshell, the eunuch delivering the imperial message had already arrived at our gate. A single imperial edict summoning me to enter the palace immediately. When my dad came back from court, his face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. He stared at me without saying a word, making my heart feel uneasy. Dad, why are you looking at me? This whole thing wasn't my— Shut up, he yelled at me. I immediately fell silent. This was the first time my dad had ever been this fierce with me. I knew he was truly furious. I changed into a presentable palace dress and followed the eunuch into that magnificent golden cage. In the imperial study, Xiaoyan dismissed all the attendants. In the vast hall, only he and I remained, along with the silence filling the room and his heartbeat growing louder and louder. I kept my head down, eyes on my nose on my heart, pretending I was a pillar. He circled around me twice before finally unable to hold back and spoke. His voice still carried lingering anger from the court and a deeply hidden grievance. See, they're all pressuring me. I didn't make a sound, he added. Your dad is pressuring me too. I still didn't make a sound. He got anxious, walked up to me in a few steps, and leaned down slightly. A faint scent of ambergris instantly enveloped me. The tips of his ears were so red they looked like they might drip blood. How about we, Your Majesty? I calmly interrupted him, stepping back to create some distance. A forced melon isn't sweet. He was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, instantly bristling. Sweet or not, I'll decide after I've tasted it. The way he said that, he sounded just like a street thug. I steadied myself, suppressing the strange feeling rising in my heart from his bluntness. I raised my head and looked straight into his eyes. Your Majesty, marriage is a serious matter that requires parental approval and a matchmaker's arrangement. My father doesn't agree. Furthermore, since ancient times, the union of emperor and empress must be guided by the stars and divination of fortune. Has the Imperial Astronomical Bureau reached a conclusion? Moreover, Your Majesty is the ruler of all people. Establishing an empress concerns the foundation of the nations, and how can it be treated so carelessly? I invoked ritual propriety, cited ancestral regulations, brought up astrology, and threw out one grand principle after another. I talked until my mouth went dry, and he listened until his head spun. On that handsome face of his expression shifted from annoyance to confusion, and then to something like admiration. In the end, he probably realized he couldn't out-argue me at all, so he simply started acting shamelessly. I don't care, I just want you this shameless behavior. Then where was even a trace of the dignity befitting the Son of Heaven? Just as I was about to continue reasoning with him emotionally and logically, the palace doors were slammed open with a bang. My father, full of rage, charged in like a lion, protecting its cub. He pulled me behind him in one swift motion, so fast it stirred up a gust of wind. Then he gave me a look. That look clearly said, "Don't be afraid, Dad's here." I instantly felt at ease, even a little amused. My father turned to face Xiaoyan, chin raised high, his face practically screaming, "You little brat." "Your Majesty," he spoke, his voice cold enough to freeze. "This old minister's daughter has been spoiled since childhood, doesn't know the rules, and has offended your Majesty. But if your Majesty can't even out-argue a young girl, how will you govern this vast empire in the future?" That was vicious, a stab right to the heart. Xiaoyan's face turned the color of pig liver, stammering for a long while without getting a single word out. He was rendered completely speechless by my father, looking utterly aggrieved, Zan, just like a big golden retriever that has been scolded by its owner, but doesn't dare talk back. My father let out a cold snort, grabbed my wrist, and turned to leave, his aura at full blast. "If your Majesty has no other matters, this old minister will take his daughter and withdraw." After 2 steps, Xiaoyan's exasperated roar came from behind. "Shen Wei, don't think I wouldn't dare to actually take her by force." My father's footsteps halted, but he didn't turn around. "Your Majesty may do as you please. However, if you disturb the servants in the mansion and happen to bump into something, injuring your imperial body, don't blame this old minister for not warning you." With that, he pulled me along and strode away, following behind my father. I kept my head down, the corners of my mouth curling up uncontrollably, already rolling with laughter inside. "Father, you're still the best. The Emperor wants to snatch a bride, but the Prime Minister won't give up his daughter." The next day, this shocking news spread like wildfire through every street and alley of the capital city. Storytellers immediately came up with new tales, things like the love-struck emperor visits the Prime Minister's residence thrice for a beauty, and the iron-faced Prime Minister scolds the imperial son-in-law to protect his beloved daughter. The entrance to our Prime Minister's residence suddenly became the hottest attraction in the capital city. Every day, countless commoners craned their necks to peek inside, wanting to see what kind of extraordinary being I, Shenji, who could make the Emperor lose composure and the Prime Minister so protective, actually was. My father was so angry he was fuming and ordered the gates closed to all visitors, refusing to see anyone. But while he could keep out the people outside, he couldn't stop a family thief who was determined to break in. As night fell, the mansion was completely silent. I was just about to go to bed when a rustling sound suddenly came from the courtyard wall. Immediately after, a dark figure sneakily climbed up onto the top of the wall. My heart skipped a beat. The next second, there was a muffled thud, accompanied by a suppressed cry of pain. The servant in charge of night patrol in my courtyard was holding a long bamboo pole, looking completely bewildered. "Huh, where did this stray cat come from?" I covered my mouth, nearly bursting out laughing. The next morning at court, I heard from my father when he returned to the manor that His Majesty the Emperor had, for the first time ever, shown up to court with a black eye. Throughout the entire session, he stared fixedly at my father with an extremely resentful gaze. As for my father, he remained calm and composed, eyes on his nose on his heart, as if he knew nothing at all. Xiaoyan was obviously not giving up. The second night, he changed the time and tried to set you from another direction. This time, he had just poked out half his head when a basin of steaming hot foot, washing water came pouring down from above, drenching him to the bone. Ha 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 ha, help. The mighty son of heaven getting splashed with foot-washing water. If this were posted on Xiaohongshu, I've already thought of the title, OMG Family, Who Understands? In the middle of the night, some pure love war god was climbing the wall and got hard countered by my dad with foot-washing water. Is Xiaoyan even a domineering CEO emperor? He is totally just a golden retriever being bloodline suppressed by his father-in-law. Prime Minister Shen did great. This kind of persistent pest needs physical defense, laughing my way to riches. On the third day, he got smarter. He picked the back garden wall where the guards were weakest, and specifically chose the gap when the servants were changing shifts. He nimbly climbed up the wall, just about to jump down. As he looked up, his eyes met directly with my father's. My father was leisurely sitting on the other side of the wall, with a pot of tea and 2 cups in front of him, looking as relaxed as if he were admiring the moon. Your Majesty, since you're already here, why not have a cup of tea before you leave? I could almost imagine the look on Xiaoyan's face at that moment, as if he'd seen a ghost. From then on, he finally settled down and stopped climbing over our wall. But the turmoil outside these walls only grew more intense. The Empress Dowager's niece. The legitimate daughter of the Duke's manor, Suwanner came to visit with a pile of expensive tonics. The moment she entered, she grabbed my hand, her face full of concern. "Sister Jer-E, I heard you've been frightened recently, so I came specially to see you." She was indeed gentle and lovely in appearance, speaking in a soft voice, Zan truly worthy of being the capital city's #1 talented lady. Unfortunately, those beautiful eyes of hers flickered with undisguised jealousy and smugness. After a few words of feigned comfort, she finally showed her true colors. "Sister, as you know, the Empress Dowager has always favored me. His Majesty's reckless behavior has been giving the Empress Dowager quite a headache. Sister, you really shouldn't make things difficult for His Majesty, lest it harm the harmony between ruler and subject." The way she spoke, it was as if she were already the Empress, reprimanding me, this ignorant minister's daughter, on behalf of the Emperor and the Empress Dowager. I picked up the teacup, gently blew away the foam, and smiled back at her. Then little sister better step up her game. After all, His Majesty is now racking his brains every day just to climb over my family's wall. Who knows what spell he is under? Suwanner's smile instantly froze on her face. She forced herself to sit a while longer, but eventually left in frustration. My father watched her retreating figure, his eyes cold. A weasel paying New Year's respects to a chicken Zan nothing good in mind. That night, under the candlelight in the study, my father opened up to me for the first time. He sighed, and his one straight back seemed to slump a little. "Jer-E, the palace is not a good place. It is a place that devours people. Father is afraid he won't be able to protect you forever." His voice carried a weariness and fear I had never heard before. My heart sank, and I suddenly understood that my father's stubbornness wasn't just because of the Emperor's offense. Deeper down, it was a heavy love and worry that only a father could have. There was no escaping it. A few days later, the Empress Dowager, under the pretense of a flower viewing banquet, summoned all eligible noble ladies in the capital to the palace called flower viewing. But the true intention was as obvious as Sima Zhao's ambitions, Zan known to all. This was to select consorts for the Emperor, and also to put me Zan the Prime Minister's daughter who had bewitched the Emperor Zan in my place. Before I left, my father gave me endless reminders and warnings. Once you're in the palace, watch more, listen more, and speak less. Dad's got everything covered. I nodded, putting his mind at ease. In the imperial garden, flowers bloomed in splendor, with fragrant clothes and elegant silhouettes everywhere. The Empress Dowager sat in the seat of honor, her bearing dignified and graceful, yet unable to hide the shrewdness and harshness in her eyes. The moment she saw me, she warmly waved me over, took my hand, and asked after my well-being. "So this is Prime Minister Shen's daughter. Truly a beautiful young lady. No wonder our Emperor has been thinking of you constantly." Then she changed her tone, patting the back of my hand, her voice turning cold. "It is just that. Your father, Zan-A, pillar of the court, how could he defy the imperial will like this? It has broken the hearts of us elders." Every sentence mentioned my father's defiance. Every word was meant to pressure me. I lowered my eyes and replied submissively, "My father is loyal to the Emperor and devoted to the nation. He would never dare harbor any thought of defiance. It is just that this humble girl is of lowly appearance. I fear I cannot bear such a great responsibility and am unworthy of His Majesty." The Empress Dowager gave a cold laugh and ignored me. The banquet began, and Suwanner became the center of attention. She first performed a piece she had composed herself, Phoenix seeking his mate, her zither skills exquisite, earning praise from everyone. Then she danced gracefully, her movements stunningly beautiful, her eyes full of affection, frequently glancing meaningfully toward the Emperor's seat. Unfortunately, the main character wasn't playing along. Xiaoyan kept a dark expression throughout, completely ignoring Suwanner's performance. His gaze was like it had hooks constantly glancing over in my direction. Seeing me relishing the plate of osmanthus cake in front of me, the corners of his tightly pressed lips lifted slightly for just a moment. After the dance ended, Suwanner probably felt neglected and wasn't willing to let it go. She suggested playing the flying flower game to liven things up. Everyone chimed in agreement. When it was my turn, Suwanner smiled sweetly and deliberately gave me an extremely obscure character. Sujabla Kryand. Sister Juri is so quick-witted, surely this character won't stump you. Most of the noble ladies present looked at each other in confusion. Clearly none of them had heard of this character. She was dead set on making me embarrass myself in public. I smiled lightly and rose calmly. Fallen flowers, one stands alone, light rain. Swallows fly in pairs. Within the inner chambers lies heaven and earth. In the cup, sun and moon linger long. Not only did I match it, I also turned the tables on her. Little sister is so talented. How about using the character Do as the topic? Suwaner's face turned pale instantly. The character Do was even more obscure and harder to match than Dean. She stammered for a long time, unable to come up with a single verse, her eyes reddening with anxiety. Just as she was about to lose face, she steeled herself, picked up her wine cup, pretended to lose her footing, and lunged straight at me. The wine in that cup was about to splash all over me. To lose composure on such an occasion is a grave offense. In a split second, I sidestepped to dodge. That cup of wine flew precisely past me and splashed onto the luxurious gown of a princess standing behind me. Ah! The princess shrieked. Suwaner also looked frightened out of her wits, and hurriedly knelt down. Please forgive me, your highness. This humble girl didn't mean to. I was a step faster than her, also kneeling down, my voice carrying just the right amount of panic. Please calm your anger. Your highness, it is all this humble girl's fault. If I hadn't reacted so quickly and dodged, the wine wouldn't have stained your highness's phoenix gown. But when I saw Miss Yu's hand slip, it was just an instinctive reaction in the heat of the moment. Please punish me, your highness. Oh my, isn't this the legendary low-tier green tea bitch? Tried to play mean girl games to embarrass Sister Juri, but ended up getting destroyed herself. This whole fake stumble and splash wine act is so klitscher. Even I, as a front-row melon-eating spectator, am tired of it. Sister Juri's move of fighting magic with magic is absolutely killer, and she even borrowed a knife to kill Zin, letting the bratty princess tear the green tea apart. Suwaner, you're still a bronze in this palace intrigue game. Hurry up and quit the group. My words seemed like a plea for punishment, but in reality they flawlessly pointed out that the instigator was Suwaner. That princess was already spoiled and willful, having been splashed with wine and looking for someone to vent her anger on. She immediately turned her attack towards Suwaner. The moment I said that, you wretched Suwaner, you dare scheme against me. The scene descended into utter chaos. Xiaoyan, who had been silent all along, finally found his opportunity. He slammed his hand on the table and stood up, his face full of righteousness. Enough. Suwaner, you offended the princess and breached etiquette first. You are to apologize to the princess and be confined to your quarters for 1 month. Then he turned to me, his gaze instantly softening. Miss Shen has been frightened. I can see you're tired as well. Let me have you escorted back to your residence. This blatant favoritism was obvious to even a fool. The Empress Dowager's face had turned completely ashen. The commotion at the palace banquet seemed like a small victory for me, but the real countermove was only just beginning. The next day, the Empress Dowager's decree came down. It said that, although I had no ill intentions, the incident was ultimately caused by me, resulting in the princess being frightened and the royal family losing face. I was to be punished by copying the Diamond Sutra 100 times at the Imperial Buddhist Hall, to pray for the royal family's blessings and reflect on my actions. My father was so furious he wanted to storm into the palace to confront the Empress Dowager right then and there, but I held him back with all my might. Father, this is an open scheme. If you go now, you'll only confirm the accusations that our Shen family is arrogant due to imperial favor and disrespectful to the Empress Dowager. Although my father looked at me, his eyes full of heartache and reluctance. Juri, your father is useless. I shook my head and smoothed out his furrowed brow. Father, you've already done more than enough for me. The Imperial Buddhist Hall was cold and quiet, with only the dim lamp and ancient Buddha statue for company. The nanny who escorted me here was the Empress Dowager's trusted confidant. Before leaving, she gave me a fake smile and reminded me, Miss Shen, you'd better copy diligently. This concerns the imperial family's blessings. I nodded calmly, picked up the brush, and spread out the scriptures. I knew this was called punishment, but was actually house arrest. The Empress Dowager wanted to trap me here, cut off my contact with the outside world. so she could deal with my father without restraint. I calmed my mind and copied the scripture stroke by stroke, but my brain was racing to think of a way to break through this situation. Late into the night, everything fell silent. My wrist was aching from copying when suddenly a very faint sound came from outside the window. I looked up alertly. A dark figure slipped in silently like a cat. When he stood still by the candlelight, I finally saw his face clearly. It was Xiaoyan. He wore a sleek set of night clothes, his hair tied back behind his head. He looked less like a majestic emperor and more like a spirited young man. He snuck over to my side like a thief and pulled out an oil paper package from his chest as if presenting a treasure. Eat up, it is still warm. I opened it to find my favorite osmanthus cake from Dexiangji. Seeing me standing there in a daze, he clumsily picked up a piece and brought it to my lips. Then, he picked up the ink stick and began grinding ink for me, his face full of guilt. I've wronged you. The Buddhist hall was very quiet, with only the sound of the ink block scraping against the inkstone. After a long silence for the first time in front of me, he dropped all his pretenses. Juri, you must think I'm quite useless. His voice was low, carrying a hint of self-mockery. The Empress Dowager holds all the power, my uncle the Duke commands the military, and in the court their people are deeply entrenched. I, this emperor, am nothing but a figurehead, constrained at every turn, walking on thin ice. My heart trembled. These undercurrents in the court and my father had also hinted at them to me before. But I never imagined his situation was this difficult. He stopped grinding the ink, turned around, and his obsidian-like eyes gazed at me intensely under the candlelight. I need the Prime Minister's power. Prime Minister Shen is a veteran of 2 dynasties, with former students and old subordinates spread throughout the court. He is the only loyal minister who can stand against the maternal relatives. I know that without a marriage alliance, given his temperament, he would never fully stand on my side. So that is how it was. I lowered my eyes, unable to tell if what I felt was disappointment or understanding. So that earth-shaking declaration of stealing the bride, those 3 absurd wall-climbing attempts, that childish confrontation in court, and none of it was merely youthful impulse. Beneath the guise of admiration, such a heavy and cold reality was wrapped. But choosing you wasn't just because you're the Prime Minister's daughter. He suddenly spoke, his voice utterly sincere. I abruptly raised my head. He looked into my eyes' emotions. I couldn't understand churning within his gaze. That year during the Lantern Festival, under the peach blossom tree, you debated with those self-important great scholars, citing classics and scriptures, holding your own against them all, leaving them speechless. I was in the crowd not far away at the time. From that moment on, I remembered you, this sudden confession like a pebble, dropped into the calm lake of my heart, stirring ripples upon ripples. My heartbeat skipped a beat. I looked at the young emperor before me, and he had the calculations of a ruler, yet also the sincerity of a youth. He had laid bare his most genuine, most vulnerable side for me to see. I realized that this marriage thrust before me was not merely about love. It was also a gamble, a battlefield for me and for my entire Shen family. I remained silent for a long time. The candlelight flickering, stretching our shadows long, I asked softly, "What does your majesty want me to do?" He smiled. Like ice and snow beginning to thaw, call me Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan and I formed a secret alliance, an alliance belonging only to the emperor and the future empress. He was responsible for passing messages outside, while I, in this cold and lonely Buddhist hall, would be his eyes and ears. Though the royal Buddhist hall was secluded, it was still a place where information gathered. Those noble women who came to burn incense would always inadvertently reveal some clues about the court. Soon, from the idle chatter of a few monks, I heard a crucial piece of information. The Empress Dowager's maternal family, Zan, that is Su Waner's father. The current Duke Zan seemed to have meddled in the canal transport. Canal transport was the nation's lifeline, rich with profits, and had always been a hotbed of corruption. I had a plan forming in my mind. The sutras I copied were collected daily by the old nanny who monitored me, then presented to the Empress Dowager for review. Xiaoyan and I had agreed on a few simple codes. In the sutras I copied next, I deliberately wrote the characters for boat, rice, ledger, and shortage using a unique calligraphy style that only my father and I could understand Zan 1 my mother had once taught me. These characters were scattered across different positions in the 100 copies of sutras, completely inconspicuous. Xiaoyan would visit the Buddhist hall daily under some pretext. but actually to retrieve the sutras I had copied the day before. He personally delivered the sutras to my father, his attitude as respectful as a true son-in-law. Prime Minister Shen, these are the peace sutras that Zhi copied for you. She said Buddhist scriptures can calm the mind. My father was no ordinary man. The moment he saw those distinctive characters, he instantly understood my intentions and situation. The next day at morning court, just as the Empress Dowager's faction was still impeaching my father for failing to discipline his daughter and allowing her to be defiant, my father suddenly launched his counterattack. Holding his jade tablet, he stepped forward proudly and presented an account ledger. Your Majesty, I have a memorial to present. I have investigated and found a massive deficit in the Beijing-Hangzhou Grand Canal transport, pointing directly to the current Duke. The evidence was irrefutable, the reasoning clear. It listed all the crimes of the Duke's household using the canal transport to embezzle government grain and line their own pockets. The Empress Dowager's faction was caught completely off guard and panicked on the spot. The Duke's face turned ashen as he knelt on the ground, stammering incoherently. The Empress Dowager trembled with rage, yet couldn't refute anything. Xiaoyan sat on the dragon throne, a sharp glint flashing in his eyes as he seized the moment to issue his order. Thoroughly investigate the canal transport corruption case. All involved parties shall be imprisoned. Duke Sui shall have his military authority temporarily revoked and reflect on his actions in seclusion, swift and decisive, clean and efficient. The Empress Dowager tried to steal a chicken but ended up losing the rice Dan she wanted to use me to restrain my father. But instead, we father and daughter joined forces and bit off a huge chunk of her power. She was so furious she smashed her favorite set of glazed cups in her palace, yet had no choice but to order my release from the Buddhist hall. The day I returned home, a magnificent carriage was parked at the entrance of the Prime Minister's residence. The carriage was loaded with top-grade Tianyun brocade and shoe embroidery dazzling and resplendent. The little eunuch from the palace said to me with a smile, Miss Shen, His Majesty said you were frightened, so he specially bestowed these fabrics to calm your nerves. My father stood to the side, looking at the cart full of silk fabrics, and for the first time didn't have a dark expression. He just let out a heavy snort from his nose. Spendthrift, yet in that tone. There wasn't a hint of disdain, but rather a bit of a father-in-law's helplessness toward his son-in-law. I lowered my head and smiled. It seems Xiaoyan, that aggrieved big dog, had finally managed to gnaw a small crack in my father's iron wall. The storm in the court had just subsided when an even greater crisis quietly arrived. A plague broke out in the outskirts of the capital without any warning. The epidemic came fiercely, and in just a few days, over 100 people had died. For a time, people were panic-stricken, turning pale at the mere mention of the plague. My father, as the Prime Minister, was duty-bound when it came to matters of the people's livelihood. He immediately submitted a memorial requesting to open the granaries for relief, allocate disaster funds, and dispatch imperial physicians to the affected areas. But when the memorial was submitted, it caused an uproar in the court. The consort clan faction led by the Empress Dowager and the Duke actually joined forces with several censors, using the excuse of an empty treasury to obstruct in every way. They deliberately delayed things, ostensibly for the sake of the kingdom, but in reality they wanted the situation to worsen, so they could attack my father and force Xiaoyan to hold him accountable. The nation faces a crisis, yet they're still playing political games. My father paced back and forth in his study, furious, and slammed his fist on the table. Looking at my father's worried face, I felt equally anxious. This plague was not just a natural disaster, but a man-made calamity. It was a conspiracy by the Empress Dowager's faction to weaken my father's power and undermine Xiaoyan's authority. I had been frail since childhood. To nurse me back to health, my mother had pored over countless medical texts and ancient books, and through constant exposure, I picked up some basic medical knowledge. I knew that fighting a plague, the most important thing wasn't medicine, but prevention. I stayed up all night writing an epidemic prevention plan, detailing a series of specific measures including isolation, disinfection, and tiered treatment. Early the next morning, I handed the booklet to my father and asked him to present it to Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan treated it like a treasure and immediately ordered its implementation according to my plan. But once the decree was issued, its implementation faced countless obstacles. The people had already been terrified by the plague and were full of distrust toward the government office. No one was willing to cooperate with the isolation measures. They would rather believe rumors and pray to gods and Buddha than follow the government office's arrangements. Seeing the epidemic showing signs of spreading, I made a bold decision. I would personally go to the epidemic zone. As the Prime Minister's daughter, I would calm the people's hearts and implement the epidemic prevention measures. When I told my father about this idea, he trembled with anger. It was the first time he had ever lost his temper with me. Nonsense. Do you have any idea what kind of place that is? It is the gates of hell. I absolutely refuse. Xiaoyan rushed over from the palace upon hearing the news. His eyes were red with anxiety as he grabbed my wrist, his grip so strong it felt like he could crush my bones. You're not going, I forbid you to go. His voice carried a panic I had never heard before. I looked at them calmly, at the two most important men in my life. One was my beloved father, the other was the man I had given my heart to. I withdrew my hand and first bowed deeply to my father. Father, your daughter is unfilial, but if I stand by and do nothing, I will never find peace in this life. Then I turned to Xiaoyan. Looking straight into his worried eyes, Your Majesty, what you must be is the ruler of all people, not the husband of one. If we can't even protect our own subjects, what meaning is there in everything we've done? He froze. The anxiety and anger in his eyes gradually faded, replaced by a complex mix of emotions. There was struggle, reluctance, but more than that, understanding, and pride. In the end, he let go of my hand in defeat, his voice hoarse as he said just one thing. I will send the best Imperial guards to keep you safe. If you lose even a single hair, I will have the entire Imperial Medical Department buried with you. I changed into a plaincloth garment, put on a veiled hat, and under the gazes of the common people, Zan filled with suspicion, confusion, and even a hint of hostility, I resolutely walked into that quarantine zone shrouded in the shadow of death. The situation in the epidemic area was even worse than I had imagined. The air was thick with the rotting stench of herbal medicine, mixed with death everywhere were the agonized moans of the sick and the desperate cries of their families. The soldiers and supplies I brought were rejected by the people. The way they looked at me was full of wariness. What is the Prime Minister's daughter doing here? Come to watch how we die. A weasel paying New Year's respects to the chicken. Facing the doubts and insults, I didn't back down. I took off my veiled hat, revealing my face. I walked into the most run-down shacks, personally fed medicine to the gravely ill elderly, and wiped away the tears of crying children. I told them that the plague wasn't scary, and what is scary is giving up. Using the medical knowledge I knew, I taught them how to fumigate and disinfect their homes with mugwort. How to brew simple, preventive herbal soups. My actions gradually moved those desperate people. They began to believe that this delicate-looking Prime Minister's daughter had truly come to save them. The situation was finally broken through. Quarantine and epidemic prevention measures were implemented in an orderly manner. The epidemic was brought under preliminary control. This day, I was in the medicine shed helping to process herbs. So busy I was drenched in sweat. A volunteer wearing a bamboo hat and a face covering walked in, silently picked up the medicine pestle, and skillfully helped me process the herbs. I thought it was a new doctor, so I casually thanked him. He didn't say anything, just nodded, but the more I looked, the more something felt off. This person's figure, why does it seem so familiar? I suddenly looked up and yanked off his bamboo hat. That familiar face, written with exhaustion yet still handsome, appeared before my eyes. I'm dying from this sweetness. This must be the legendary mutual pursuit plus true love revealed in adversity. But Your Majesty, you're such a lovesick fool, a CEO of a great nation, abandoning your company. Just putting on a disguise to come to the epidemic zone and be your wife's bodyguard. Even fighting to take beatings for her, this combo of playing the victim, hero saving the beauty, forget Sisters your even I'm going crazy with heart flutters. I'll take this Royal Supreme Edition dog food. You all do as you please. It was Xiaoyan. I was so shocked that the herbs in my hands fell to the ground. Are you crazy? Do you know what kind of place this is? What if you, before I could finish, he reached out a finger and gently pressed it against my lips? Shush. He winked at me, his voice kept very low. My subjects are suffering. My future empress is in danger. How could I sit safely and comfortably in the palace? My eyes instantly turned red. From that day on, we became the most special pair of volunteers in the epidemic zone. He took off his dragon robe, changed into coarse cloth garments, and together with me brewed medicine, comforted patients, and prepared the dead for burial. When tired, we'd lean back to back and take a nap in the corner of the medicine shed. Once, a patient who had lost control of their emotions due to a family member's death came charging at me with a wooden stick. I had no time to react at all. It was him who, without hesitation, shielded me behind him and took that heavy blow squarely on his own back. I held him, scared out of my wits, tears streaming down uncontrollably. But he turned around to comfort me instead, laughing and saying he was thick-skinned and tough, that he was fine. That thin veil between us was completely pierced in this life-and-death environment. However, danger didn't only come from the virus. Suwaner's faction didn't back off because of our efforts. They sent spies to poison the water source in the quarantine zone, wanting to let the epidemic spiral completely out of control, with me in the epidemic zone as their target. Fortunately, Xiaoyan had prepared in advance. The Imperial guards he brought were not just guards, but also secret guards. They discovered the spies' plot in time, turned the tables on them, not only catching the culprits, but also following the trail to find solid evidence of the Duke's manor secretly causing trouble. On a night with light rain falling, he draped his outer garment over me and held me tightly in his arms. "Jir-E, once all this is over, I will announce it to the world and marry you with great fanfare." I didn't answer, but I buried my head deeper into his embrace. In my heart, I already had the answer. Half a month later, the plague in the outskirts of the capital was completely subdued. Xiaoyan and I returned in triumph. On the day we returned to the capital, the streets were packed with people. The common folk spontaneously stood on both sides of the streets. Lining the road to welcome us, they held flowers and eggs in their hands, shouting "Long live His Majesty," and also shouting my name. "Long live Miss Shen." Miss Shen is a living bodhisattva. I sat in the carriage, looking at those simple and sincere faces outside the window, my heart filled with mixed emotions. My father personally welcomed us at the city gate. When he saw that I had lost weight, his eyes instantly reddened, his lips trembled for a long time. But he couldn't say a single word. In the end, he just walked over and firmly patted my shoulder. That force contained 1,000 words. There was heartache, there was lingering fear, but more than anything, there was pride. The hearts of the people pointed the way. The tide of events was unstoppable. Xiaoyan, riding on the immense prestige gained from quelling the plague, launched a thunderous strike in the imperial court on the second day after returning to the palace. He publicly revealed all the evidence of the Duke's manor delaying disaster relief and secretly poisoning people during the epidemic. The ironclad evidence was overwhelming, leaving no room for denial. The deeply entrenched faction of the Duke was uprooted entirely. All the embezzled disaster relief funds were fully recovered. Suwaner, as one of the masterminds, was brought before Xiaoyan. She wept like a pear blossom in the rain, kneeling on the ground and pleading desperately. "Your Majesty, this humble subject knows her wrongs. Please spare me just this once." Xiaoyan sat on the dragon throne, his expression ice cold, not sparing her even a single glance. "I gave you a chance. A cup of poisoned wine ended her sinful life." Afterward, Xiaoyan personally went to the Empress Dowager's Xian Palace. He calmly took back the Phoenix Seal of Regency from her hands. "Mother Empress, you're getting old. It is time for you to rest well." The Empress Dowager slumped in her phoenix chair, seeming to have aged 20 years overnight. From then on, he became truly alone, and also became a true sovereign with real power in his hands. The court situation was completely reshuffled overnight. My father looked at the spirited, decisive young emperor on the dragon throne, his eyes complex. But deep in those eyes, for the first time, there was genuine approval. 3 days later, Xiaoyan came to my home. This time, he didn't to my home, nor did he act shamelessly. He brought a grand procession for the marriage proposal, offering the most precious betrothal gifts: 3 matchmakers, 6 betrothal rites, an 8-man palanquins, and nothing was missing. With his imperial dignity, he gave our Shen family the most supreme honor. My father sat in the main seat, looking at the marriage contract he presented, and remained silent for a long time. Finally, he slowly nodded. "My daughter, I'm entrusting her to you. If you dare bully her, even if it costs me these old bones, I will drag you down from your dragon throne." On the eve of the wedding, my father called me into his study. He took out a red sandalwood box that had been sealed for years from a hidden compartment at the top of the bookshelf. Jiri, this is what your mother left for you. I was stunned. My mother passed away from illness when I was very young. I can't even remember what she looked like. With trembling hands, I opened the wooden box. Inside was a painting and a letter. The painting depicted a gentle and beautiful woman whose features bore a striking resemblance to the late emperor in his portrait. I unfolded the yellowed letter. The letter was written by my mother to me. In the letter, she recounted a long-buried past. It turned out that my mother had been the late emperor's childhood sweetheart, the white moonlight he held dearest in his heart. They met in their youth, and feelings quietly blossomed between them. But after the late emperor ascended the throne to stabilize the court, he had no choice but to marry the daughter of the Grand General at the time, who later became the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager was jealous and ruthless, viewing my mother as a thorn in her side. She schemed and framed my mother, accusing her of having an affair. The late emperor was furious, but had no evidence. To save my mother's life, he had no choice but to use a female corpse to fake my mother's death and smuggle her out of the palace, and my father at that time was just a young official who had just entered government service. It was he who, risking the execution of his entire clan, rescued my gravely wounded and unconscious mother from the mass grave. He settled her in a villa on the outskirts of the capital city and cared for her attentively. Over time, the two fell in love and eventually became husband and wife, living under assumed names. It wasn't until several years later, when things had blown over, that my father brought my mother and young me back to the capital city. Holding the letter, tears streamed down my face. I finally understood everything. I finally understood that my father's words, useless at everything except being emperor, were not just spoken in anger. Those words were filled with his deep-seated fear and distrust of the imperial family. He was afraid that Xiaoyan would be like his father, Zan, bearing the title of emperor in name only, yet unable to protect the woman he loved. He was afraid that I would repeat my mother's fate. Clutching the letter, I rushed out of the study and found my father standing in a daze in the courtyard. His silhouette, under the setting sun, looked so lonely, Father. I gently hugged him from behind. His body stiffened. Father, I know everything now. I buried my face against his back, my tears soaking through his clothes. Don't worry, Xiaoyan is not the late emperor, and I am not mother. I will protect myself. And I will protect him too, and protect our Shen family. My father turned around, looking at me, his aged eyes brimming with tears. He raised his rough hand and stroked my head. After a long while, he let out a long sigh and smiled. My Jiri, you've grown up on our wedding night. Red candles flickered, filling the room with romance. The moment Xiaoyan lifted my bridal veil, his eyes were filled with amazement and tenderness. He held my hand, our fingers tightly intertwined. Jiri, I finally married you. I looked at him, this man who had been entangled with me for so long, who had gone from ally to lover step by step. I took out my mother's letter from my sleeve and handed it to him. He took it with confusion and unfolded it. Under the candlelight, his expression gradually turned solemn, then shocked, and finally transformed into deep heartache and guilt as he read the contents. After finishing the letter, he didn't speak for a long time. Then he suddenly pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly, as if he wanted to meld me into his flesh and blood. His voice was hoarse, trembling uncontrollably. I'm sorry for letting your family suffer so much. He didn't say a single word in defense of his forebears. He chose to take responsibility and apologize. He let go of me, cupped my face in his hands, and looked solemnly into my eyes. Jiri, I once thought that marrying you was the most important move in my game to reclaim power. He was very honest, without the slightest concealment. But from when did this chess move become my only purpose? Even I can't tell anymore. Perhaps it was that year during the Lantern Festival, when you stood under the peach blossom tree, spiritedly debating and defeating those great scholars. Perhaps it was later when your father chased me out of the manor with a broom and you hid behind the door, secretly laughing. Perhaps it was in the epidemic zone when you were exhausted all over, yet still walked toward me with bright eyes. I swear I, Xiaoyan, in this lifetime, will have only one empress in my harem Zhenzhenji. My harem will forever have only you alone. He lowered his head and solemnly pressed a kiss on my forehead. That was an emperor's highest promise to a woman. I smiled, tears streaming down my face. I reached out my arms, hooked them around his neck, and took the initiative to kiss him. All the past grievances, all the political calculations, in this moment completely vanished into thin air. What remained were only two hearts, tightly dependent on each other. I became the most unique empress of the great Zhou dynasty. I didn't like extravagance, so I abolished many wasteful old customs in the harem and advocated frugality. I also didn't enjoy composing poetry or pretending to be cultured. Using the business acumen I learned from my mother, I revitalized the poorly managed enterprises under the royal family's name. In just 1 year, I replenished the increasingly empty national treasury. I also proposed to Xiaoyan to establish a women's school in the capital, giving women the opportunity to learn to read and write and acquire skills to make a living. This proposal caused an uproar in the court. Those conservative old ministers submitted memorials in opposition one after another, bitterly accusing me of a hen crowing at dawn, a wicked empress meddling in politics. Xiaoyan, in the court, overruled all objections and slammed a memorial hard onto the dragon desk. The empress's talents surpass yours 100-fold. Having a virtuous empress is a blessing for the nation. Whoever dares to criticize the empress again is criticizing me. My father stood at the head of all officials, listening to his daughter being attacked by those old stubborn fools, so angry he was blowing his beard and glaring. But upon hearing Xiaoyan's domineering declaration defending his wife, he muttered outrageous, truly outrageous, yet couldn't help but grin from ear to ear, under our joint governance. Great Zhou swept away its previous decline and ushered in a golden age of clean governance and prosperous people. We would also steal moments from our busy schedules, change into plain clothes, and sneak out of the palace to see the vast lands under our governance, to see the ordinary people living and working in peace. He would get jealous for an entire day just because I glanced at some handsome scholar, childish like a kid. I would also massage his shoulders when he was tired from reviewing memorials and bring him a warm bowl of ginseng soup. The most ordinary married life is, in this world, the rarest happiness. Years later, the son of Xiaoyan and me, the little crown prince, could already run around everywhere. This little guy perfectly inherited my cleverness and my father's protectiveness. This day, the little crown prince was hugging my father's leg, tattling in a soft, milky voice. "Grandpa!" Father Emperor made Mother Empress angry again. Mother Empress said she won't let him sleep in the room tonight. My father was trimming flower branches in the courtyard. Hearing this, his eyes widened, and the scissors in his hand went snip, cutting off the thickest branch. He blew his beard, bellowing with a booming voice, "Xiaoyan, get your ass over here." Not far away, Xiaoyan, who was accompanying me to admire the flowers, though now a monarch of growing majesty, still instinctively shrank his neck upon hearing that shout. With a bitter face, he went over to get scolded. That look was no different from the young man who was rendered speechless by his father-in-law years ago. At night, it was time for the capital city's annual lantern festival. Again, Xiaoyan wanted to take me out of the palace to see the lanterns, but was afraid my father wouldn't agree. So, 3 days in advance, he sent all kinds of rare and precious things to the Prime Minister's residence every day, trying every way to please my father. My father accepted everything without refusing a single thing. In the end, he still kept a stern face and waved his hand. "You can go. But come back early. The road is dark and slippery. Keep an eye on your wife." At the Lantern Festival, the crowd surged like waves. Xiaoyan held my hand tightly, like the most ordinary couple walking through the bustling crowd. He bought me the most ordinary peach blossom hairpin, put it on me with his own hands, then smiled foolishly. "Zhi, see, I didn't lie to you, did I?" In his eyes, thousands of lantern lights were reflected, bright as a river of stars. I looked back at him and smiled too. Although you're useless at everything except being emperor. As my husband, you're barely passable. Pinji Si Chen, a hen crowing at dawn official explanation. Pinji means hen Si Chen means crowing at dawn. The literal meaning refers to a hen crowing in place of a rooster at dawn. In ancient Chinese feudal ethics, this idiom was often used to describe women usurping power and disrupting governance, interfering in state affairs. This is a term with strong derogatory and feudal patriarchal connotations, often used by ancient court officials to impeach consorts who meddled in politics, sisters. This is the classic put-down rhetoric exclusive to those patronizing old farts in ancient workplaces. Okay, translated into modern speak, it is, what do women know about state affairs? Hurry back to the harem and pop out babies. These old fossils are just salty because our girl Juri is killing it in her career, building women's schools and filling up the national treasury too hard. Total sour grapes energy. They can't make money themselves but won't let our girl boss shine, constantly trying to gaslight our sister Yi. But then wife-protecting maniac CEO Xiao hit them with the reverse Uno card on the spot, leaving them questioning their entire existence in 1 second. So yeah, forget that hen crowing at dawn nonsense. Dan girl bosses who get that bag and build their careers are the real GOAT greatest of all time.